The U.S. economy is in big trouble, and Robert Kiyosaki is warning everyone. He says that growing debt and printing too much money could make prices rise and savings lose value. Many people may struggle, but the wealthy are preparing to benefit from this crisis. How are they doing it? Stay until the end to find out. But before that, let's understand the problem. Imagine you're sitting in a huge stadium and a drop of water falls every minute. At first, it seems nothing, but the drops double every minute. After some minutes, the whole stadium is flooded. It starts slow, but it happens so fast you won't even see it coming. This is how financial crises hit. Small at first, then a massive flood. This is exponential growth. Things starting slow but growing really fast. And it's exactly what's happening with the U.S. national debt right now. The debt is growing at an alarming rate, and the government keeps borrowing more and more money. This means it's like the drops of water in the stadium. It's growing faster than anyone expects. At first, people didn't worry about the debt because it seemed manageable, but now it's getting out of hand. If this continues, we will soon have to face some very tough consequences, like higher prices for everything and even more financial problems for future generations. Just like the water in the stadium, the debt is getting out of control, and once it's flooded, it'll be too late to fix. Why rising debt is a problem for everyone. Robert Kiyosaki, the well-known financial expert, has been warning about this rising debt for years. He says the U.S. government is like someone who keeps borrowing money without ever paying it back. Imagine borrowing money from a friend to buy a new phone, but instead of paying your friend back, you borrow more money to buy a new car. Soon, you're stuck in a never-ending cycle of borrowing to pay off old debts. This is what the government is doing, borrowing to pay off old debts. The problem is, when you borrow too much, it becomes harder to pay back and you get stuck. As the U.S. debt keeps growing, the government has to spend more money just to pay interest on the debt, which means there's less money for things like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Kiyosaki points out that this spending beyond our means is a huge problem. Instead of dealing with the issue and cutting back on unnecessary spending, the government keeps borrowing. This is not just bad for the government, it's bad for everyone. As the government borrows more money and prints more dollars, the value of the dollar goes down. This leads to inflation, which makes the prices of everyday things, like food, gas, and clothes, more expensive. So because of that, the dollar is losing its power. Let's talk about the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar has been the main currency that countries use to trade goods for many years. It's called the reserve currency. But now, countries like Russia and China are starting to trade with each other using their own money instead of using U.S. dollars. This is a huge shift, and it's something that Kiyosaki has been warning about. Think of it like this. If the U.S. dollar is the main currency people use, it's like a popular restaurant in town. But if everyone suddenly starts going to a new restaurant, the original restaurant's popularity starts to fade. The U.S. dollar is like that popular restaurant. Once it's no longer the main currency used for trade, its value will drop. Why does this matter? If the dollar loses its value, everything becomes more expensive. Let's say you have $100. If the value of the dollar drops, your $100 won't buy as much. Things like food, gas, and even your savings will lose value. Kiyosaki's message is that we shouldn't rely on the dollar for saving or investing. Instead, we should look at things like gold, silver, and real estate. For example, gold has always had value, no matter what happens to the dollar. If you buy gold now, even if the dollar's value drops, your gold will still be worth something. It's a way to protect your wealth from the falling dollar. Now the question comes, what is inflation and why it's hurting everyone? Inflation is when prices go up, but the value of money stays the same or goes down. Let's say you could buy a sandwich for $5 last year, but this year, the same sandwich costs $6. That extra dollar is due to inflation. It's the invisible force that makes everything more expensive over time. Kiyosaki warns that inflation is getting worse. The reason inflation is rising is because the government is borrowing more money and printing more dollars. This makes the value of money go down and the prices of things go up. It's like when there's more of something, it becomes less valuable. Think of it like having too many baseball cards. If everyone has one, they're not as valuable anymore. Inflation affects everyone. If your salary stays the same but prices keep rising, it becomes harder to afford the things you need. It feels like you're working harder for less money. For example, if your grocery bill was $100 last month, it might be $120 this month. That extra $20 is inflation, and it's happening everywhere. Interest rates are going up. What it means for you. Interest rates are the extra money you pay when you borrow money. For example, if you borrow $100 from a bank and they charge you 10% interest, you'll have to pay back $110. The 10% is the interest. Kiyosaki points out that interest rates are rising because the government has borrowed so much money. As interest rates go up, it becomes more expensive to borrow money. This affects everyone who needs a loan. For example, if you want to buy a house, you may have to pay higher interest, which means your monthly payment will be more expensive. If you have a loan, you'll also pay more interest. For people who are relying on bonds, which are like loans you give to the government or companies, this is also a problem. When interest rates rise, older bonds become less valuable because they pay lower interest than new bonds. This means you could lose money if you hold bonds as an investment. Kiyosaki warns that rising interest rates will hurt people who rely on loans or bonds for their money. It's another reason why you shouldn't rely on traditional investments. You need to find ways to protect your money from these changes. Bonds aren't as safe as you think. A lot of people think bonds are a safe investment. When you buy a bond, you lend money to the government or a company, and they promise to pay you back with interest. But here's the thing. If interest rates rise, the value of old bonds goes down. Imagine you bought a bond that gives you 2% interest, but now new bonds are offering 5%. If you want to sell your bond, no one will want to buy it at the same price you paid because it doesn't give as much interest. This means you could lose money. U.S. government bonds are like loans that investors give to the government in exchange for interest over time. They are usually considered safe investments, but there's growing risk. The U.S. has massive debt, and to pay for it, the government keeps borrowing more money. This increases the chance that the government might struggle to repay bondholders in the future. If trust in U.S. bonds drops, interest rates may rise, bond values may fall, and the U.S. could face a financial crisis, similar to what happened in countries with debt problems like Greece. Kiyosaki says that bonds are not as safe as people think, especially when interest rates are going up. Instead of relying on bonds, Kiyosaki advises investing in assets that hold their value. The assets which does not rely on interest rates and can help protect your wealth. What should you do? Kiyosaki's advice is simple. Don't rely on the government or the financial system. The system is broken and it's getting worse. The national debt is growing, the value of the dollar is dropping, inflation is rising, and interest rates are increasing. Instead, he suggests investing in things that hold their value. Gold, silver, real estate, and businesses are all smart investments. These things don't rely on the government or the dollar's value. Kiyosaki also emphasizes the importance of financial education. The more you learn about money, the better decisions you can make. Understanding how the economy works and how you can protect your wealth will help you stay safe during uncertain times. Final thoughts. Preparing for the future. We're living in a time of economic uncertainty. The rising national debt, inflation, and interest rates are creating a storm that will affect everyone. But the good news is, you can prepare for the future. By investing in things that hold their value and learning about how money works, you can protect yourself from the financial chaos that's coming. Just like the water in the football stadium, these problems are growing fast. But if you act now, you can protect your wealth and secure your financial future. It's all about being prepared and thinking ahead. Take control of your financial future now, so you don't have to worry about the flood when it comes.